Okay, so today will be day 2 of chapter 5, section 3. So on day 1, we reviewed our geometry skills of our SOHCAHTOA. We did a few examples. We also reviewed the special right triangles and did some examples of finding the 6 trig functions for the 30, the 60, and the 45-degree angle. And you're not going to be using your calculator when you do questions like these. You will have to draw special right triangles. So today brings us to the point where we left off, which were finding the different angles in each quadrant. Now, the first thing you're going to do is calculate the reference angle, which is going to be located in quadrant 1. And then to find the angle for quadrant 2, you're going to do 180 minus that reference angle. So what we're going to be doing is trying to figure out what our reference angle is, and it's going to be either a 30, a 60, or a 45-degree angle, and that will be our reference angle. And then to find the angle for quadrant 2, we would take 180, subtract that reference angle, the 30, 60, or the 45. In quadrant 3, you would take the angle, and you're going to in this one, you're going to take the angle and subtract 180. And then for the next one, it'll be the angle minus 360. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. So what we're going to be doing here is you'll find an angle. So for example, let's say I have a 30-degree angle. So that's my theta. That's my reference angle. And then to find the angle that's located in quadrant 2, I'm going to take 180 and I'm going to go ahead and subtract that reference angle from 180. And then in quadrant 2, the angle is going to be 150. In quadrant 3, I'm going to take 180 and I add the reference angle, and I would get 210. So what you do is you take the angle, so like here it would have been 210 minus 180, and that would give you your reference angle. But what we're going to be doing is finding the reference angle, and we're going to be doing 180 minus the reference angle, 180 plus the reference angle to get the angle that's located in each one of these quadrants. And then over here, we would be taking 360 and subtracting the reference angle, and that would give you the angle for quadrant 4. So in this case, 360 minus 30, and the angle that's going to be located in quadrant 4 would be 330 degrees. Now, remember, when you make your triangles, you're always going back to the x-axis. What we're going to be doing is these. I know what's in, like the green, the orange, and the blue is kind of confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the reference angle because we're going to graph an angle, and then we're going to figure out how many degrees it takes to get back to the x-axis, which will become our reference angle. And then to find the angle that's located, say, in quadrant 2, we're going to do 180 minus the reference angle. And then in quadrant 3, it'll be 180 plus the reference angle. And then in quadrant 4, it'll be 360 minus the reference angle. So those are going to be the calculations we do. The ones that were typed in there, that would be in case you had to find the reference angle. When you graph it, that's another way that you can do it without drawing the triangle. So what we're going to be seeing is when we go to try to find these reference angles, here's our axis, our x and our y axis. So when we go to graph these, it's always back to the x axis. So what's going to form here, it's going to sort of look like a bow tie because all of our reference angles are going to be located right here. These are going to be all our thetas. So we're going to be making them back to the x axis. So let's try some examples, and you're going to see what I mean by all of this. So the first one is asking us to find the sine of 210. Now, you're not using your calculator, yes, I know you could do this on your calculator, hit the sign button, hit 210 degrees, and then it's going to give you negative 0.5 or negative half. But we're going to be doing these questions without a calculator, so it'll help us to graph the angle so we can see which quadrant it ends up in. So if I go ahead and make my X and Y axis here, and remember there's 0, 90, 180, 270. These are all my quadrant angles. So when I go to graph a 210 degree angle, I'm gonna go start here. So this is my initial side. I go 90, 180, and then I have to go 30 more degrees. I need to draw in that terminal side, and I need to include the arrow so I know that it was a positive 210. So my reference angle is going to be the degrees it takes to get back to the x-axis. So I had to go 30 degrees more past 180 to get to that 210 degree angle. So this is a 210 degree angle. So now we have our special right triangle. So this is a 30, 60, 90. And again, you could fill in your numbers. So across from the 30 is 1. Across from 60 is the square root of 3. And across from the 90 is the 2. Remember, the signs in quadrant 3 are going to be negative, negative. So this is actually going to be a negative 1 and a negative square root of 3. The hypotenuse is always going to be positive. Now, if you want to think of it in terms of SOHCAHTOA, this is opposite to our reference angle, this is adjacent, and this is the hypotenuse. So now what we need to do is we need to figure out what sine is, and remember sine, and again, you could also memorize, so up and down, opposite is y, and adjacent is x. So when you go to do sine of 210, you're either going to memorize this as y over r or opposite over hypotenuse. So then I'm going to fill in my numbers. So the sine of 210 is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. You can leave it like that or pull the negative sign out front. Now, there's actually two different angles that will give me negative 1/2 when I do sine of it. So I need to figure out what other quadrant will give me this same value and what angle it is. So I'm going to do my all students take calculus. And I need to figure out where sine is gonna, the other quadrant, I need to figure out where sine is also negative. So I knew sine, so for my reference angle, it was the 30. So I know sine is negative here and here. So the other angle that would also produce this would be something in quadrant 4. But here, we're just trying to find the value of it. This one's coming later. So here, in order to do this, if you did the calculations that were on the other slide, remember it was reference angle is equal to angle minus 180. So if you took 210 and you subtracted 180, that gives you your reference angle of 30. That's how you can use those calculations that was typed in orange in quadrant 3. So for tangent of 300, I'm going to go ahead and graph it so I can see what quadrant it ends up in. So 300, so again, 90, 180, 270, and this is 0 and 360. So to graph a 300 degree angle, I'm going to come around 90, 180, 270, and to get to 300, I got to go another 30 degrees. Now, your reference angle is what it takes to finish the angle. So it would, and I go back to the x-axis, so it's 60 degrees here. Now again, the calculation in quadrant 4, remember what was typed in there, it was reference angle was equal to 360 minus the angle. So 360 minus 300, and that gives me a reference angle of 60 degrees. So that's why I made my triangle with the 60-degree reference angle. So now what I need to do is label my sides. So across from 60 is the square root of 3. Across from the hypotenuse is 2. And then across from the 30 is a 1. Remember, in quadrant 4, the signs on the ordered pairs are positive, negative. So here, my x value here is positive, but my y is negative. And again, this is opposite to the 60. This is adjacent. And then the 2 is hypotenuse. So again, you can either choose to do tangent is y over x, or you could do your TOA and do opposite over adjacent. Either way, we're going to fill in our numbers. So negative square root 3 over 1 simplifies to negative square root 3. Because really what we're doing here also is the tangent of 60. It's the same thing. So there's always going to be two angles that have this same value. So in this case, to get negative square root 3, I'd also have to do the tangent of 60 degrees. So let's try the next one. Tangent of 675. So again, 90, 180, 270, 360, and 0. So I'm going to come around and I'm going to graph this. I actually have to go around one full circle. So I'm going to start here on my initial side. I go around one full circle, that's 360. Then I got to go another 90, another 90, and then I'm going to go another 45 degrees to end up and graph my 675. So if it helps you to subtract 675, subtract 360, and then you can see that you went around one full circle and then another 315 degrees. Now again, we always make our triangle go back to the x-axis. So in order to finish the angle, it was 45 degrees. And again, if it helps you to take, remember in quadrant 4 where your angle ended up, you can also take 360, subtract, so it's the angle 315, so 45 degrees. So now I'm going to label my sides. So again, in the 45, 45, we know the two legs are 1 and 1, and then the hypotenuse is the square root of 2. Now what we need to do is also remember in quadrant 4, the signs on the order pair is positive, negative. So this is going to be a -1 here. This is my y. This is my x. This is also opposite and adjacent. And this is hypotenuse. So for tangent, same thing we just did. You can either do y over x or the TOA, opposite over adjacent. And then when you fill in your numbers, you're going to get -1 over 1, which simplifies to -1. So the tangent of 675 equals -1. Now, yes, I know you can just get out your handy-dandy calculator, hit the tangent button, type in 675, and as long as your calculator is in degrees, you should be getting -1. But again, these questions where our reference angle ends up being a 30, 60, or a 90, you're not using a 30, 60, or 45, you're not using your calculator. You have to draw the special right triangles. You need to memorize the relationship of the sides. Let's try cosine of a negative angle this time. So if I go ahead and graph it this time, I'm going clockwise now. So I'm going to go, let me add in the degrees, 90, 0, 360. Now also remember this is negative 90, negative 180, negative 270 as well. So if I start here on my initial side, I go negative 90, negative 180, and then I need to go 60 degrees more to get my 240 degree angle. So this is a negative 240. And again, remember my reference angle here, I make it go back to the x-axis. So this reference angle is 60. Let me get rid of theta and just put a 60 there. So 60 degrees, 30 degrees. And again, let's fill in the numbers. Across from 60 is square root 3. Across from 30 is 1. And then positive 2 for the hypotenuse. Remember, in quadrant 2, the signs on the ordered pair are negative, negative. So this is going to be a negative root 3 and a negative 1. So again, this is opposite, or it's also your y value, going up and down like the y-axis. This is your x value, or adjacent, and the 2 is the hypotenuse. So for cosine, you're either going to memorize it as x over r, or adjacent over hypotenuse if you're using your acronym of SOHCAHTOA. So once I fill that in, my adjacent or my x value is negative 1 and my hypotenuse is positive 2. And again, you can simplify it and put the negative sign in front or just leave it like that. So that would be the cosine of negative 240 with a reference angle of 60 degrees. All right, next, secant of 210. Let's graph it. Now, you don't necessarily have to graph it. If you realize that this is going to end up in quadrant 3, you can also use that formula from the other thing and take 210 and subtract 180, and that's going to give you your reference angle. You don't necessarily have to graph it. I always like to give myself a visual. So 90, 180, 270, 0, and 360. So when I go to graph a 210, I'm going to go 90, 180, and then to complete it, I need to go another 30 degrees. So my reference angle here is 30. And here's my triangle. 60's up here. So again, label your sides for the 30, 60, 90. I have root 3 across from 60, 1 across from 30, hypotenuse is 2. Remember, the sides in quadrant 3 are negative, negative. So this will be a negative 1 and a negative square root of 3. So again, this is opposite. Or if you're using the x, y, and r, this is your y value, just like the y-axis goes up and down. So it is this leg of the triangle. And then here, this is your x or your adjacent. And again, I'm going to go ahead and figure out what secant is. Secant, remember, is the reciprocal to cosine. So it's going to be r over x or hypotenuse over adjacent. So once you fill in those numbers, the secant of 210 is equal to 2 over negative square root 3. I can't leave it like that. I have to rationalize. Multiply top and bottom by square root 3. And then I get 2 square root 3 over 3, or negative 3. And then if you want to just pull the negative sign out front of the fraction, you can. So secant of 210 is negative 2 times the square root of 3 over 3. Let's try cotangent. And again, I'll draw it. So 90, 180, 0. So if I come around here, go 90, then I need to go another 45 degrees to finish off the 135-degree angle. So I'm going to make my triangle back to the x-axis. Do not be tempted to make it go back to the y. It's always back to the x. So my reference angle here is 45 degrees. So my two legs are 1 and 1. Hypotenuse is square root of 2. Remember, the signs in quadrant 2 are negative, negative. So this will be a -1 and a -1. So now when I go to fill in cotangent, you're either going to memorize it as x over y or adjacent over opposite. And in this case, it's going to be -1 over, oh, this should be positive. Oops. Signs here are negative, positive. And so this one should be a positive. So -1 over +1, which simplifies to -1, because the signs in that quadrant are negative, positive. Now, 210, I just already graphed it here. So here I just have to figure out what cosecant is. Cosecant is the reciprocal to sine. So it's r over y, and it's hypotenuse over opposite. So cosecant of 210, using the picture up above, my r value is 2. My y value is -1, which simplifies to -2. For number 13, the sine of -510. Let me graph this one down here. So I'm going to be going clockwise. So if it helps you to figure out how many times you have to go around, I could start adding 360. So I know I got to go a full circle around. So I'm going to go a full circle. And then I got to go 150 degrees more. So 90 and then another 60. So there's my terminal side. And my reference angle to get it back to the x-axis is 30 degrees more. So it's a 30, 60, 90. Again, I'm going to label my sides. √3, 1, 2. Signs in quadrant 3 are negative, negative. So a -1, a negative square root of 3. So the sine of -510, remember sine is going to be y over r, or opposite over hypotenuse. So y in this case, and you could label this is y, or opposite. This is x, or adjacent. This is your r and your hypotenuse. So when I go to fill it in, my opposite is going to be -1. My hypotenuse is +2. So the sine of -510 is -1/2. Now, also, if you think about it, doing sine of -150 would give you exactly the same answer without having to have gone around one full circle. Now we're going to do a really big one, tangent of -1020. So again, to figure out how many times I need to circle around, let me start adding some 360s. This will give me -660. I'm going to add another 360. This is now going to give me -300. And then add one more 360 till I finally get my positive reference angle. So I actually have to circle around 3 different times. So let me go ahead and graph this one. However, you don't have to necessarily graph it because you already know your reference angle is 60. I'll go ahead and graph it just so you can get practice graphing. So it's negative, so I'm going to be going clockwise. So one full circle, and then another circle, and then one more, and then I'm going to finish it off and end up with 60 degrees. Fix this. So what we could do here is 360 plus 360 is going to give me 720, and then another 300 gets me to the 1020. So let's do it that way. So go around one full circle, that's the first 360, 720, and then another 300 degrees, and now I'm finally where I need to be. And again, my reference angle is going to be the 60, and 30's up here. Root 3, across from the 30 is going to be 1, and then the hypotenuse is 2. And signs in quadrant 1, positive, positive. So now tangent of negative 1020, either y over x or your TOA, opposite over adjacent. So this would be my opposite or my y. This is my hypotenuse or my r, and this is my adjacent or my x. So tangent of negative 1020, my y value is the square root of 3, my x value is 1, simplifies just to the square root of 3. Okay, so when you're finding the angle given the trig function, what we're going to do, again, we're still using special right triangles. However, notice the restriction here. I only want answers that are between 0, including 0, because it's got a bracket, up to 360. You should not be giving me any answers 360 or greater. 360 is the cutoff. Notice the parenthesis around it, meaning you cannot list 360 as an answer. So let's go ahead and see what we need to do here. Now, a clue here, as soon as I see square root of 2, that's a clue that it's going to be the 45, 45, 90 triangle. So what we're going to do here is draw our triangle. And we can put in our 45s, 1, 1, root 2. And then what I need to do is I need to figure out cosine. So cosine is supposed to be x over r, or adjacent over hypotenuse. So again, this could be y. This, if I'm going to do it in relation to this one, this is going to be, well, let's do it in relation to the other one. This will be adjacent. This will be opposite. And again, we can fill it in. So let's see. Let's just do opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So if I fill it in, the cosine of 45, adjacent over hypotenuse, 1 over root 2, rationalize, root 2 over 2. Now, what I need to do is I need to figure out my angles. So I can already see that my reference angle is 45. So what I'm going to do here is do my all students take calculus. So the reference angle is located here in quadrant 1. But notice the answer here is negative. I need to figure out which quadrant cosine is negative in. And cosine is going to be negative here and here. So now in order to find the answer for theta, I need to use the rules. And the rules were, this is the reference angle. This one's going to be 180 minus that reference angle. This will be 180 plus the reference angle. And this will be 360 minus the reference angle. But the calculations that I'm going to complete to get this answer are going to be this and this, because that's where cosine is negative. So I'm going to be doing 180 minus 45, and I get 135. And then here I'm going to do 180 plus 35 plus 45, and I get 225. So the answer for theta, that will give me negative square root 2 over 2, are going to be 135 and 225. You're going to be getting two answers because there's two places that are going to give you this answer when you do the cosine of these two angles. Instead, it was cosine of theta equals positive root 2 over 2. Then, all students take calculus. Cosine is going to be positive here and here. So the answers to this problem is going to be the reference angle, which is 45. And then to get the angle from quadrant 4, I do 360 minus 45, and that angle is going to be 315. So when it's positive square root 2 over 2, the two answers are 45 and 315. So you have to figure out which quadrant it's in, and then you're going to do the calculations. Let's try another one. Now, technically, if you memorize what all the angles are for each one of the quadrants for 30, 60, 90, you don't have to keep going back and doing these calculations because you're not using a calculator for this part. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example, and then I'm going to show you what you could memorize to save time. So here, they want us to find cosine of theta when it's equal to the square root of 3 over 2. Soon as I see square root 3, I know my reference angle is either going to be 30 or 60. Now, I'm not sure, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do both of them. So if I have my triangle here, 30, 60, 90, fill in the numbers, 1, 2, root 3. So I'm going to label it first in relation to the 30. So this is opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. I'm going to draw the same triangle again, 60, 30, right? And then I'm going to label the sides based off the 60. So then this root 3 is now opposite, the 2 is hypotenuse always, and then the 1 is adjacent to the 60. So now let me do cosine for both to figure out which one gives me this answer. So if I do cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent for the 30 is going to be square root 3. So if I do 30 here, adjacent is the square root of 3 over 2. Oh, and look, it's what I needed. If I would have done the blue one first and done cosine of 60, adjacent is 1 over 2, which wasn't what I was looking for. So I can see that my reference angle for this is the 30 degrees. Now what I need to do is all students take calculus. I need to figure out which quadrants cosine is negative, and cosine is going to be negative here and here. Now the reference angle is not part of the answer. I just needed to find it to figure out the angle from quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. So remember the calculation here, 180 minus the reference angle. So 180 minus 30. And in quadrant 2, it's 150 degrees. In quadrant 3, it's 180 plus the reference angle. So it's going to be 180 plus 30, and it's 210. So the answer for theta in this question is 150 and 210. So if you did this and you did the cosine of 150, you're going to get this answer. Or if you did the cosine of 210, you would get this answer. Let's try number 16. Again, I've got the square root of 3. Now, my advice to you is when you take this test, on your scratch paper, quickly sketch out the triangles. Don't have to keep drawing them every single time. Maybe put it down there once, label the sides, and then you could keep using it. And also, maybe already have memorized what the angles are in each of the quadrants, so you don't have to keep doing that 180 minus reference, 180 plus reference. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a minute. So let me go ahead and just draw the two triangles. I need to figure out which is my reference angle, the 30, the 60, or the 90. So for this one, I'll do it in reference to the 60. So root 3, 1, 2. And then same thing here, root 3, 1, 2. But in relation to the 60, this is opposite, and this is adjacent. This is hypotenuse. Now if I label them in relation to the 30 over here, the 1 is now opposite, this is adjacent, and this is hypotenuse. So now what I'm going to do is figure out tangent is opposite, it's TOA, opposite over adjacent. So for the red, let's do it for the 60. So opposite is square root 3, adjacent is 1. Oh, look at this, I did it the first time again as well. So if I would have done the 30, the tangent of 30 is going to be 1 over the square root of 3, and I would have had to rationalize. So root 3 over 3. So this is the one I do not need. I need the reference angle of 60. So again, all students take calculus. My reference angle is the 60. So that's my reference angle. I need to figure out where tangent is negative. Tangent is negative in quadrant 2 and 4. So to get my two answers, I'm going to do 180 minus the reference angle, which is 60. And this gives me 120. Then I have to do for quadrant 4, 360 minus the reference angle, and I get 300. So the two answers here are going to be 120 and 300. If tangent were positive, I'd be getting the reference angle and then the angle from quadrant 3. Now, notice 17 has plus minus. So when it's plus minus, you're going to get 4 answers. You're really going to get all 4. Now, again, I need to figure out, is my reference angle the 30 or the 60? So again, if you draw, and again, it doesn't matter if you reverse the spots of the 30 and the 60. What's important is the side across from 60 is root 3, across from 30 is 1, and this is hypotenuse. So remember, cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, the reciprocal to sine. So if I go ahead and do cosecant of 30, hypotenuse in relation to the 30, it's going to be 2 either way. And then 2 over opposite is going to be 2 over 1, which is 2. This one's not going to work. So if I do cosecant of 60, in relation to the 60, this is going to be opposite. And this is my hypotenuse. This is what I needed. So here if I do 2 over root 3, I got to rationalize. And this gives me what I was looking for. So my reference angle is the 60. So because it's plus minus, even though I'm doing all students take calculus, it's positive, sine is positive, or sine and cosecant are positive here and here, but it's negative here and here. So I need all 4. So in here, in quadrant 1, this is your reference angle, and it was the 60. And then in quadrant 2, it's going to be 180 minus 60, so it's 120 here. And then here it's 180 plus 60. So this is going to be 240. And then 360 minus 60, it'll be 300 in this quadrant. So it's all 4 angle measures. And then the last one, it's got a root 3 again. So as soon as I see that, then I can go ahead and check to see which one it's going to be. And if you notice right up above, I had already done the tangent of 30. So the tangent of 30, this is my reference angle. So 30 degrees is my reference angle because tangent of 30 is root 3 over 3. So all students take calculus. Tangent will be positive here and here. So my first answer is the reference angle. And then the other answer is going to be 180 plus the reference angle. And it'll be 210. So the two answers for this one are 210 and 30. Now, one thing that you could do to save time, if you wish, if you don't want to have to keep doing the 180 minus, the 180 plus, the 360, what you can do is, let me add a slide here. If you want to have already calculated the 3 angles that you're worried about, so we have one for a reference angle of 45 degrees. So we know in quadrant 1, this is the reference angle. We know that in quadrant 2, this is going to be 180 minus that 45, so it's 135. And then in quadrant 3, it'll be 180 plus 45, and that's going to be 225. And then in quadrant 4, this is going to be 360 minus 45, and it'll be 315. So if you want to memorize 45, 135, 225, 315, then you don't have to go back and recalculate it each time. Same thing, let's say it's a reference angle of 30 degrees. So again, the reference angle is in quadrant 1. In quadrant 2, it's going to be 180 minus 30. So this one's 150. Then 180 plus 30, and this is 210. And then 360 minus 30, and it's 330. So these would be all the angles that are associated for each quadrant when your reference angle is 30. And then the last one, when your reference angle equals 60 degrees, so reference angle is in quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, remember it's 180 minus that reference angle. So 180 minus 60, and you get 120. And then in quadrant 3, it's 180 plus 60, and you get 240. Then in quadrant 4, then you could do 360 minus 60, and it's 300. So if you want to memorize these, and again, when you take the test, just draw the special right triangles one time if you want, so you don't need to keep reusing them. Or you can keep reusing them. So 45, 45, 1, 1, root 2, 30, 60, 90, root 3, 1, 2. And if you're going to label it based off the 30, this is opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. And then if you wanted to label it based off of the 60, this would still be root 3, but now it's opposite when you talk about 60. The 1 would be adjacent, and the 2 would be hypotenuse. For the 45, 45, it doesn't matter which one's opposite and adjacent because you have 2 of the same angles. So again, if you wanted to label it off of this, this would be opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So that is it. Your homework is that PDF. And again, if you have any questions, we'll go over it. Tomorrow, make sure you bring your calculator. We are going to be solving right triangles, and we'll be doing this using your calculator.